Hello friends, I'm back with my new video, and in this video we are going to see how can we implement a heterogeneous vector, and that is using std variant. So first of all, what do we mean by heterogeneous vector? So we know that vector is a STL container that can get similar data type elements. That means if we create a vector for int, it can have only integer elements. If we create vector for char, then it can have only char. It is not possible that one element is char, another element is int, and the third element can be float or double or any user defined type. So that is not possible. But if we want to use vector in that way, where we want to insert elements of different data types, then we say this is heterogeneous vector. It can have different data types as a different elements inside the same vector. So we can implement this using std variant. Std variant, that is something introduced in the C++ 17, and this is a class that can have different data types. That means it can have value with the different data types. If we create std variant for integer, it can have store value of integer, it can store value of float, it can store value of double. So it can have all these things, but we need to specify what are different data types we want to assign to this particular class. And the last but not the least, we should always write professional C++ code. So whatever code we are going to write, it has to be as per the C++ standard, and it should have a look like a professional code in production. So let's start quickly. So a vector should have type of std variant. So std vector, and this should have std variant, right? Now we will have to specify what data types this variant can be having. So let's create it for integer, double, a string, and a user defined data type. So it should work with int, it should work with double, it should work with the std string, and it should work with a user defined data type. Let's say a class that is student. We will create this class. So let me write this class quickly. Class student, and this class will have student name and age only. So first public, then private, data members should be private, name should be std string, and age should be, I'm not going to use integer because age cannot be negative, so unsigned short age. So let's quickly write the constructor of this class. I will write constructor in such a way so it can be used as a default constructor as well as parameterized constructor. I already mentioned this in my previous lecture as well. So it should be const std string reference name, and I give default value empty string, const unsigned short age, I give default value 0. To initialize members, I will use initialization list, and age. Okay, and we do not require anything in the body now. It has to be explicit. It should not throw any exception. it doesn't throw, so no except. And quickly write a function print so that we can print object of student. And, print, this will simply print name and age. And, uh, do remember, this is a print function. It is not going to modify any data member, so it has to be const, and it cannot throw. So no except. Fine. So we are done with our class. So now we are saying that vector is a vector of a variant, and variant can be integer, double, string, and student. So let's say vect is a vector. And as a better practice, I would say instead of typing all this, let's use one more feature of advanced C++, that is using, and give a user defined name, better name. I say uh, heterogeneous vector, heterogeneous vector, and that is this one. This is my heterogeneous vector, and I'm going to use, instead of this I will use, and for element also let me write one using heterogeneous element. So element is nothing, it is a variant. Okay, fine. So now I should use this one. Okay, now let's put different data type values inside this vect implies spec. Let's put an integer first. Let's say value is 10. Then the second one, let's put value double, that is 10.10. Or third, let's put a value that is std string. So for a string, let's say string, and let's put object of student class. So we create object over here, student, and let's give name Raj, and his age is 22 years. Okay. So now we have inserted different data types as elements. So at zeroth element, data type is int. At first element, uh, data type is double. At second, it is a string, and at third, it is a student object. Now, how can we read it? So to read this, let's do one thing. Let's write a for loop so that it can iterate, range for loop, and I would say const reference element, and it will iterate through the vector, and it will print all the elements. So let me write a print function. It should be a global function, and I need to pass element to it. So let me write print function void print, and the type should be heterogeneous element because we are passing heterogeneous element. So type should be heterogeneous element and it should be const. This is always a very good practice to use const, and if possible use const preference. So let's say variable var. Fine. Now how can we retrieve the value? First of all, how do we know what is the type first of all? So there are two things that we can check. One is there is one data member inside the variant class, and that is index. So this index we can use to figure out what is the type of data. So I can write first of all if, and if you see over here, for integer index will be 0, for double index will be 1, for string index will be 2, for student index will be 3. So this is index not inside the vector. This is index for the std variant class. This index is the data member of variant. So just see, we will call index on the variant class. So if index is 0, that means it is integer type. So if integer type, let's print it. So we can say int, this is int, and let's put the value. Now how to get the value from var object? We cannot directly write var. There is a std get, that for tuple also we use that get template function, which is a global one defined in the std namespace. So here also we will use that. So std get, and we need to specify type. So since we already determined if index is 0, that means type is int. So we need to explicitly write over here, and we need to get from var object. So yes, it will print the value from var. Okay. So for other three also, let me write else. If index is 1, it should be double because next one is double. So if index is 1, it should be double, and get, in get, the template parameter should be double. This should be double now. Else, what is index 2? Index 2 is std string. And we need to pass std string as template argument over here. And last but not the least, that is our object of student class. So it should be, we will say we already written print function over here, so we can call simply print here. So let's get the object first. Object means object of student. So I need to specify student over here. Now this will return object of student. On this, let's call print, and this will print information of student name and age. So let me build the code. If any compilation error, let's see. Yeah. And let me run the code. Now you can see integer 10, double 10.10, it is nothing, 10.1 only. A string is a string. A student name Raj, and his age is 22. So in that way, we can have a heterogeneous vector, and here we have used std variant to get a heterogeneous vector. We can implement it without std variant as well. And in that case, we need to apply our own logic, how to achieve this. So in my next video, I will implement heterogeneous vector without std variant, and then we can also see how can we implement our own classes so that we can store different data types in the same vector. Uh, Let us do one thing quickly. Here you see, I always say that we should write a code like a production code. So comparison with the value 0, 1, 2, and 3 is not readable at all. So quickly write a class enum so that we can use enum over here. So enum class basically. So I say enum class, I say heterogeneous type, and this type will be first is int, second is double, third is a string, and fourth is student. So this is our enum class. Now let's use this. So instead of 0, I will use int. Instead of 1, I will use double. Instead of 2, I will use a string. And instead of 3, I will use a student. Now, if you see, there is a compilation error. We cannot have this equal to. Basically, it is not overloaded so that it can have what index will return. Index will return size of t. You can see it returns size of t. So size of t cannot be compared with the enum class. So we need to use static cost on the size of t so that it can be converted into heterogeneous type. So let me do that. We need to static cost, convert it into heterogeneous type. Okay, so expected an identifier. Okay, what identifier is expecting? So heterogeneous type is fine. Okay, fine. So let me copy this and put everywhere. Let me build it. Yeah, and let me run. It should give the same output. Yeah. So now this is better code, and here also we have taken care how we should write code in a professional way. So instead of putting hard coded values, we should use enum, and in modern C++ we have enum classes. So wherever we can use enum classes, let's use them. So now it is more readable. You can see if this is int, we are clearly getting, okay, this is int, so we are getting int value from the var, that is object of variant, and like double string and string. So this is all about heterogeneous vector. In my next lecture, I will implement heterogeneous vector again, but without using std variant. Over there, we will create our own classes and we will achieve the similar thing with our own code. We will not going to use advanced C++ feature. We will simply use std vector, and then we will design it, and if we will implement it. So that is all from today. Thanks a lot.